Going to go ahead and call this Monday, October 16th meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Welcome everyone. We're also meeting hybrid via Teams, so welcome to those that are participating remotely as well. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance, and Chuck Stearns, would you mind leading us this evening? Thank you, Chuck. I do have a proclamation to read tonight in awareness of Child Grief Awareness Month, and I'll read that proclamation now. Whereas 50,000 Montana youth will experience the death of a parent or sibling before their 25th birthday, and whereas many kids feel misunderstood in the wake of loss, thinking that their grief is invisible to those around them, and whereas all bereaved youth deserve advocates supporting them as they navigate a world without their person. And whereas effective grief support can help mitigate possible negative outcomes by fostering positive coping mechanisms and resiliency. And whereas recognizing this month serves to build a foundation of support for grieving youth, strengthening a national community of bereaved individuals, support service organizations, and community members. And whereas our community is committed to supporting one another, working to raise awareness of children's grief, and to ensure that no child grieves alone. Now, therefore, the month of November shall be recognized as Children's Grief Awareness Month, and I will affix our seal of the City of Whitefish this evening after the meeting. So thank you, everyone, and please keep this in mind as we move into the month of November. Be there for our children, please. With that said, we'll move on to communications from the public. Any communications this evening not related to the public hearings, you're now welcome to approach the council. Just name and address for the record, please.
Hi everyone, Leonette Galaz. I live at 265 Colorado Avenue, D4. I'm here just to speak for a group of people that met this evening for a rally for community housing in the Flathead Valley. It's a citizens initiative. There's no sponsoring organization. We came up with the name Housing For, which we put on our shirts. The idea is that people can fill in the blank, housing for who? Like, who are you fighting for? We had about 40-ish community members show up, which is really inspiring and awesome and wonderful. We took a walk through town, over the viaduct and back, and ended up in front of City Council, where we just had some folks share some of their housing stories. The general vibe or consensus is just that, you know, we know that the community has been working on the challenge of, you know, the housing crisis and community housing, not just affordable subsidized housing, but attainable housing by lots of community members. But the general consensus is that it's not enough. We need more help. People are really struggling under the burdens of rent. People would like to buy and live and stay here in these communities, many of whom grew up here, and they don't want to leave their home. And they think that we think that there are a lot of solutions still on the table that we would like to encourage and request and even demand our community and our community leaders to engage in some of those solutions that can help us, because we're struggling and bearing the weight, and so we want that message to be heard. And yeah, I thank you for listening. Thanks.
Thanks for coming tonight, to all of you. Who's next?
My name is Paul Gilman. My neighbor Bill Berg and I are Whitefish homeowners, and we stand today opposed to the new 2023 Tistler Bees impact fee update that's before the council
Excuse
today.
me, if you're here to speak to that item, you'll have to wait until I call that public hearing.
Okay, it's not a general one here? Okay.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, when
Yeah,
would that be?
it's just under item 7A and 7B, so we'll get there in probably 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, brother, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Mary.
Again, Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main in Kalispell. I just wanted to bring a couple of opportunities to your attention. On October 26th, that's a Thursday, Flathead Lake Biological Station is hosting a talk by Dr. Emma Rossi. She's an aquatic ecologist with the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, and the title of her talk is Our Rivers on Drugs, Pharmaceutical and Personal Care Products as the Agents of Ecological Change. They are going to, the presentation itself is at the biostation, which is a drive for many people. So they have agreed to Zoom the presentation, and we'll be providing you with a link for that and sending out community notices. So anybody can give me a call at 755-4521 if they want a link to the talk. But we think, given the issues that our community is facing and just the prevalence of pharmaceutical and waste and products like PFAS chemicals, that this is going to be really an important topic for water quality countywide, and particularly with the county proposing a composting facility. We think it needs extra attention. The second item.
When is that, Mary, again?
What,
When is that again?
it's October 26th, which is a Thursday. It begins at 3 p.m. at the biostation, and you'll be able to Zoom and watch it as well. The second item I want to bring to your attention is that, as you know, in the case Hell versus State of Montana, the courts ruled that DEQ does need to consider climate change as an issue in decisions that they are making. DEQ has in turn proposed a series of listening sessions around the state in 3 cities, and public comment is open until December 1st. We will be hosting at the Hampton Inn in Kalispell on Thursday night, starting at 5 p.m. so public can have some background information on the hearing itself and be able to join with others concerned about decisions about policy in our state and be able to provide comments on that. We think the city should look at this. You have until December 1st, and I think it would be appropriate for the city to look at sending comments, really encouraging the state to take into consideration climate change impacts in things like transportation and all sorts of issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Further public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online?
For those of you who are online, please raise your hand and I will call upon you as you raise your hand if you have anything to speak towards that is not on the public hearing.
Hey, Michelle, I'm not seeing an option to raise my hand.
It's Nathan.
Oh,
Okay.
so go ahead, Nathan.
So we can't get.
Hey, Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue. Hopefully you can hear me decently well. I'm headed down towards Helena this evening, so I'm not in the room there, but just wanted to mention that the Governor's Housing Task Force here that was established last July is reconvening for our first meeting back here after the session tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. And that should be on Zoom. Link should be on the DEQ website. So that's all I wanted to put out there for today, since that's coming out tomorrow. And since I won't be on later, happy that you guys are doing the pro housing grant. And that's all I'll say about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathan. Drive safe. Anyone else, Michelle?
Doesn't look like we have anybody else.
Thank you. Any volunteer board reports from the council? Not seeing any, we'll move on to item 6. You have the consent agenda, including the minutes from the October 2nd meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us now to our public hearings. We will start with item 7A, which will be ordinance 23-23, and an ordinance adopting amendments to the city's impact fee ordinance, and this will be on a first reading. Dana.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. One thing to note is immediately following this is a public hearing on Resolution 23 not sure which the number is, but that would approve the actual amendments to the rates. So it is up to the Mayor and Council if you'd like to hold one public hearing, two separate motions, just because the topics are so interrelated. I think the public would probably have similar comments. I have one staff report for both hearings.
Yes, one public hearing, please, two motions.
Okay,
Thanks.
fantastic. Montana Code Annotated 76-1602 does require the city to review our impact fees every 5 years. In November of 2022, the city went through an RFP process to find the most qualified consulting firm to prepare an update to our impact fees with a new service area report and impact fee study for our 7 currently assessed impact fees, which include park maintenance buildings, paved trails, emergency services center, city hall, stormwater, water, and wastewater. Over the past year or so, staff, along with the Impact Fee Advisory Committee and City Council, has met with Tischler Bice, who is contracted to prepare these updated reports, including a recommendation of a new methodology, planned capital projects, and to come to an ultimate conclusion of what is the maximum defensible impact fee for developers. So it's important that everybody understands an impact fee is a fee that is charged to developments based on the demand and added capacity needed for public facilities. It is not a fee that is paid by each individual, it is at the development stage. If we were not have impact fees, those projects would likely still need to move forward given growth, and so they would be borne then by all taxpayers or ratepayers. So on August 21st, the City Council held a work session with Tischler Bice where they presented the final service area report and impact fee study. And it does recommend 7 impact fees, though different from the current impact fees we currently charge. So we would now have, with this report, a Parks and Recreation impact fee, paved trails, City Hall, police, fire, water, and wastewater. I did include the PowerPoint presentation from that work session just to jog your memory, but also within the ordinance, Exhibit A is the final service area report and impact fee study, and then Exhibit B is actually the changes to our code, where we have impact fees listed out in Title 10, Chapter 2. So during the work session, City Council directed staff to bring the final report as drafted, policies and rate changes to the council at a future meeting. So that's where we are today. We did prepare the ordinance and resolution, both of which are up for consideration. While the service area report and impact fee study provides the city with the necessary documentation and calculations to move forward with the fees and determines that maximum fee, the city does have flexibility in implementation, and we did discuss this at the work session, where you could do a phase of the impact fees, so increasing it slowly over time, or you could do an immediate rate adjustment. But it's important to remember, if you do not adopt the rates at the full amount, that you would have to have other funding to support these projects. Because if you recall in the study by Tischler Bice, they had come up with how those projects would be funded 100%, and oftentimes there's both growth related, which is the impact fees, and then existing uses, which is other rates or fees that the city charges, taxes, for example. So the recommendation for the ordinance and resolution is that they both become effective January 1st of 2024. A small delay to allow the ordinance to become effective, but also to allow those that are currently in the process of submitting building permits to be prepared that, within the next couple months, there will be a change. One important decision that the council really needs to understand when they're approving this impact fee study and service area report is that the capital improvement plan, which is shown on page 166 of your packet, but page 167 of the PDF, I think. You'll see in the capital improvement plan, it lists out the expansion of City Hall. And so that is something that currently we haven't discussed because this is a 10-year capital improvement plan, whereas the typical, the one that we look at just during the budget process is a 5-year. So if we were to expand that, you would see all of these projects on there. But that's why this report covers a 10-year span. So we do need, the council would need to recognize that we would be moving forward with moving forward with the plan for the 3rd story on City Hall, which was designed already for this building. If you guys recall, that level was cut during the approval process due to funding, but we have the plans. It was always intended to be a 3-story City Hall. We will within 10 years, likely need that space for offices. We are at the point where we have, I believe, 1 office space downstairs available. And so we're gonna have to start looking at how we can squeeze more people in, really. Get rid of meeting rooms, which are all utilized by staff. So within 10 years, I do see us needing to go up a 3rd floor. So that is one decision that will need to be made. But it is important to note that that expansion would be 100% growth driven. And so we would anticipate that the City Hall impact fees would cover that cost where it's estimated. If not, we would have to come up with the other funding within those 10 years. But I do believe that we're capable of doing so. Let's see here. The proposed changes to the impact fee ordinance really just address the new service area report and impact fee study, so it gets rid of reference to the old studies because this is completely new methodology. We do have some minor typo changes or changing the city manager reference to just his to also just designee, so since I'm not a he right now. And we also did add one thing outside of state law changes or the report changes, which is to allow 100% deed restricted housing units, permanently deed restricted housing units that are deed restricted for affordability to pay their impact fees at time of C of O, certificate of occupancy, instead of at building permit. This was a request that came forward from Jerry Dunker with the Trailview project, one that we see as both meeting state law requirements and it allows for a delay in financing needs for those costs. But because their development is still driving the demand for those facilities to be expanded, we would still assess the fee. It would just be a delay in collection. I do not recommend doing that for all because it does take staff management to make sure that those are paid after the fact at C of O. And then that does not prohibit us from reimbursing impact fees should under our housing programs and resort tax decide that we want to have a impact fee reimbursement plan. That's separate from this issue. This is just changing the timing of when they're due. And so again, most of the changes are just related though to the impact fee service area report and the changes of how we are now assessing those. Okay, so from the financial perspective, adoption of this ordinance and resolution will increase impact fee rates assessed on new developments, as well as the related revenue that we collect. It is important, and it has always been this way, regardless of Senate Bill 142, but impact fee revenue collected is dedicated to a certain use. We now will have to have a fund identified for each impact fee facility. We've already done that in one fund, but it's per account. And so realistically, it's not a huge change. It's just creating a new fund. It's not a big deal. And that also was clarified in the code. And then the actual expenditure of any impact fees will be budgeted through our budget process, will be appropriated. So this approval will not appropriate funds at this point. So at the work session, the Impact Fee Advisory Committee did recommend adoption of the service area report and impact fee study and the associated fees at the maximum rate. Staff also recommends the same after holding a public hearing and considering public testimony. Again, if you are not interested in proceeding with the City Hall expansion within 10 years, we recommend that you amend that motion to exclude the adoption of the City Hall portion of the service area report and impact fee in both the ordinance and resolution. I do have a couple things I'd like to address just based on public comment that we've received to date. One is, I think it's important to know that we did receive a letter, and Paul and Bill Berg are here, but we have reviewed this letter that was submitted to the council. We have discussed this with Tischler Bice. They still feel confident that we've met the criteria of MCA. For example, 2A in this letter says we do not have an CIP. It is actually within the service area report. State law does require that all projects be identified in the service area report. That is where that lands. We actually have the water meter sizing they bring up is a good point, and one that we had already thought of. So in the beginning of September, we started working with AE2S. They're going to develop the meter sizing process for us, whether it's UPC or AWWA. Both are alternatives to use, and they've made it clear that it doesn't necessarily matter. In addition, we have information from the State Building Codes Division, the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, that municipalities are allowed to establish and build our own system and take into consideration water demand, anticipated future demand, and other factors when we consider our water utility, which includes the meter sizing. In fact, in that email, they reference AWWA as an appropriate use. Within that letter, they also reference an expert witness report. Obviously, they're finally ingrained with the litigation that's ongoing. And we've reviewed that expert witness report. It is in my opinion, it was dated July 21st of 2023. They did not look at the final report. The percentage that they reference on the water or wastewater, I think it's the water facility, is not the percentage that is in the final report that is in front of you. So it is an outdated report. Also, in their letter, they call out the competence of Tischler Bice, and I think it's very important that council realize we went through a very standard RFP process. Tischler Bice has done over 900 impact fee studies, 17 communities and counties, cities and counties in Montana, they've done reports for. And so I believe that they are competent in what they have done. When we went out for an RFP for the 2017-2018 update, we had 3 respondents, FCS Group, Tischler Bice, AE2S were the only 3 that responded. So in my opinion, we have gotten the best of the best that we can here in Montana. And I do not believe that we are in need of these individuals' services. I would question their expertise in impact fees specifically. I haven't seen any documentation to show that they're experts in this field, and I feel that we are working with the expert in this field. So if you have any questions about this comment or other comments that you received this evening, we'll be happy to answer those. But with that, I'll turn it to council.
Thanks, Dana. Appreciate the staff report. Any questions for Dana? Rebecca, and then Ben.
Dana, I just was reading, could you address on the first page of this comment from Bill Berg and Paul Gilman, it says both water and sewer fees are significantly overstated due to inconsistent data provided by the city and calculations performed by our consultant, and that the city was overcharging sewer fees roughly 4 times greater than the maximum allowed by law. Could you address that? 'Cause
I
it's kind of
believe
outlandish.
it's hard to understand, and maybe you can ask them directly what they meant by that. But I believe they're referencing our current fees, and it is our position that the city is not overcharging our sewer fees. The only thing that we have noted, and we noted this prior to litigation, was the error in the fixture count when calculating a standalone shower. So we actually had, in the summer of 2021, an error was brought to our attention by Mr. Gilman and Paul Berg, and, excuse me, Mr. Gilman and Bill
I'm going to get their names confused. I apologize. Not what I mean to do. Mr. Gilman and Mr. Berg. So with that, we determined that there was an error that involved the unit weight that was assigned for each standalone head, single head standalone shower. Oh my goodness. We actually publicly acknowledged that error, and we did begin that audit you're all aware of to determine who was owed refunds for impact fees. In February of 2022, the class action lawsuit was filed against the city in federal district court, which included claims based on that single head standalone shower issue. The city, we continued our audit, and we were actually ready to issue refunds this month. But on September 29th, the federal district court granted the plaintiff's request for class certification. And due to the class certifications, we are no longer able to communicate directly with many property owners to continue our audit or issue refunds. So the class action does complicate the refund process in numerous ways, and such we are temporarily suspending our audit and refund process at this time. But when it goes to this 4 times, and again, I don't know, there's no data to show how they came up with a $4 million over 5 years. We saw a 20% decrease in building permit revenue from 2022 to 23, and a 50% decline in our permit numbers in 2022 from the prior year. So to say that, using 1 year and calculating that over a 5-year period, if that's how it was done, would be inaccurate. We are seeing a slowdown in building.
Thank you, Dana.
Yep.
Ben?
I know you did just mention this, but could you just kind of recap to make sure I understand it correctly? The issue of how we calculate meter size and how we will be calculating meter size?
So currently, we do have our process for calculating meter sizes with a fixture unit count using the UPC. The weighting factor is where it's different on the impact fee calculation size, but for the meter calculation, we're using the UPC code. But what we're doing is having an external consultant, given the litigation, given we want the public to trust us in how we're doing this, knowing that impact fees are now based solely on meter size, no fixture count issue, that we want to make sure that meter size is determined correctly. And I do see in their letter that they recommend you let the plumbers do it, or the architects. The problem I see is that while they are going to do that, some will do it honestly and correctly based on UPC. Some will not, because if you actually sized it lower, you would pay a lower impact fee. What that does is you'll wear out your meter faster, or the city will get complaint that they are not getting the service of water service they need. The city pays for all replacement meters. The owners pay for the first one. So we would then be bearing the cost of the replacement meters because they'll get worn out quicker. So we wanted to make sure that working with AE2S, who did our rate study for water and sewer rates, they're going to help us determine how we do meter sizing. I believe it will be coming as a recommendation to be AWWA standard. We have in there training that will be provided to staff, and I spoke with Craig today. He expects that we'll have that information by the end of the week, well before the implementation of this ordinance resolution.
Got it. So that entire technical process is not really a part of this ordinance. That's something that staff is going to handle internally.
Correct, yes, because our water, wastewater, and garbage rules and regulations do designate the responsibility of meter sizing to the utility services supervisor in public works or finance. And so we're going through that process to have an externally prepared process, just given litigation.
And other more important things. Why do you have any insight as to why the proposed impact fees here are higher than other municipalities in the area?
It's based on our capital improvement plan, and I will tell you, I was just at the league. Kalispell chose to cut their impact fees in half. And that was because they're okay with current ratepayers paying for expansion that is driven by developers, or at least a portion of that growth. Do impact fees push people out of the cities? It's a question. I couldn't answer that for you, but I believe Whitefish has a high enough demand for building here, that these impact fees as a percentage of the project cost, even at these higher rates, are not going to deter individuals who see Whitefish as a place to develop.
I mean, do you think that the cost of building the improvements having changed probably in a fairly significant way in the last couple of years has something to do with that?
Absolutely. So the impact fees are based on projects and project projected costs. We know, for example, the water storage facility south of town, the cost went all the way up to 13 million all of a sudden. We were looking at, like, years ago, probably even like 4. So it's an increase in cost, absolutely. We've seen that across the board for all of our capital projects.
So like in Kalispell, for example, they presumably had a higher maximum defensible fee, and then their council just decided no.
Right. The statement I heard during the meeting was that they chose to cut their impact fees in half to, in their opinion, encourage development in Kalispell.
But other than that, do you think the methodologies followed are generally fairly similar to what we're doing here?
I have not reviewed Kalispell's methodology, but I would say that, Tischler-Bice has prepared reports for Missoula, Bozeman, Great Falls. They've done a study for Flatthead County back in 2007, actually. But I believe that we follow the similar methodologies as other municipalities in Montana.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Steve?
I have a few, Dana. The first one gets back to what Ben's first question. Do we need language in this that references how we're going to come up with our water meter size?
I don't believe so. That is covered under our rules and regulations for water, wastewater, and garbage. That's already a council adopted document that does state how it's being done, which is through our utility services supervisor. If you want to change that, we'll have to bring that policy forward. But I can just tell you that, I can give you guys the emails where E2S is working on it. It's an internal staff decision to move forward with a consultant.
Okay. My only thought was that it might clean up some of the perception around it.
Yeah.
That we're, instead of just having a chart that says this is how much it is.
Impact
some
fees are
language that-
separate though from service, so keep in mind not everything is going to have an impact fee, although when you have a meter issued, it often is. But I think impact fees they're a separate code in Montana. Water utilities are a separate code in Montana, and so to keep the meter sizing and the control over the utility separate from impact fees, I think is important. But again, if you want us to do that, I would bring forward the rules and regulations. I don't believe it belongs in here.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was my question about that. I do think it's appropriate that it's not calculated by the developer or his plumber or her plumber. I think it's appropriate that we tell them how much they owe, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another question I have is, have you seen other cities that charge impact fees for paved trails and parks and rec? These are new impact fees, correct?
No, so paved trails and parks and rec have always been impact fees we've had.
Okay.
I've got to look, but I want to say Missoula or one of the communities has at least a parks impact fee. I think parks is common. And I'd have to look to see if there's a paved trail one out there. But the only what we've changed is we've dropped stormwater and replaced the emergency services center with police and a separate fire. So there's ESC basically came fire and police separately.
Okay. And then is it common that it's based on, because in the past, it looks like we had a set fee for several things. And is it common for other municipalities to charge based on the square footage of the dwelling?
I think it's a common practice. I mean, according to Tischler-Bice, they did state to me there are communities out there doing it. One thing you'll see in the report is, those are on a square footage basis. So it's actually helpful for, your smaller units. If you aren't building a 2,500 square foot home and you're building a 1,500 square foot home, you're going to actually pay a lower rate than if you're building a 5,000 single family home, 5,000 square foot single family home. So by doing it this route, it's actually more equitable on the non-utility impact fees.
Okay. And if I understood you correctly, we cleared up the issues from the lawsuit about the miscalculation of fixtures in the home by going straight to the meter size rather than trying to do some calculation.
For impact fees, so
Okay,
though I will say, like with ours, there's two parts to that. Like the meter sizing is based on fixtures, but our impact fees were also based on the fixtures. We're not assessing for additional fixtures. If you have a 3/4 inch meter, you pay the same rate. If you have the base or the maximum allowed for a 3/4 meter,
Okay.
And so forth for meter sizes.
okay.
Yep, that's clear.
And I don't know if you wanted to comment or if you could comment on what we found when we audited homes that were part of this, initially maybe part of the lawsuit, or I don't know how to say it. I know we audited to look at how many people were actually, how many fixtures they actually had. Is that something you can comment on?
I'm gonna let Angie take that, just so
Okay.
I don't misspeak.
Sure, Steve. So what we found when we audited people was that they had added additional fixtures after they paid impact fees. So really that there was impact fees due to the city. You're not going after those. That's not our intent. But people do, and that's part of the reason going just to a strict meter size makes sense, because people are going to add fixtures or maybe not add fixtures. So just going to a strict meter size makes a lot of sense, because plans change, and I'm not saying people intentionally did it at all. I mean, things just come up and people probably don't even think, gosh, I should probably, not add this fixture without paying an additional impact fee. I don't think there was any nefarious, just things change, so it's a lot easier not to have to do it based on fixtures.
Okay, but I mean, I just wanted to be clear, I think, to the public that when we looked at that to try to remedy the situation, we found that some people weren't owed a refund, correct? Do you know what percentage roughly, or?
I don't, Steve, off the top of my head.
Okay, but there were several, correct?
Yes, there were
Okay.
several.
All right, I just wanted to make that clear to the public. And then my two concerns regarding the steep increase in impact fees, because there's a little bit of sticker shock here, I'm not going to lie to you. Do we have any plan for allowances for affordable housing other than 100% deed restricted?
How it's drafted, no. That is up to council if you so decide. But we do have, the housing committee was tasked with looking at an impact fee reimbursement plan. I think there's different opinions on if that really will move the needle on more housing that is actually affordable based on the percentage cost of a true development. But you're more than welcome to add some language there if you'd like to change it, but keep in mind we would have to come up with the other portion. If we aren't going to charge the full rate for affordable housing developments, we would have to cover that with other fees.
Okay. And then, just in your estimation, due to this rather steep increase, I mean, if we don't have some allowances for affordable housing, I mean, I see this as inhibiting possibly people building something that is affordable. If you have to pay, if your impact fees go from $7,000 to $20,000 for a 2 duplexes or something like that, and you were going to try to make one of them affordable, seems like it could inhibit projects like that from coming forward.
I think it could, but I think that if these fees are adopted and you see that as prohibitive, that's when that impact fee reimbursement program that was called out in our housing roadmap becomes more applicable. That you could look at the 4 mills we levy for property taxes to use a portion of that, because then you'll have more control over the AMIs served. You will have, I think that would be the better place to do that, because if you don't have it on affordable housing, you have to increase rates to pay for the improvement. We still have to get these projects done. They're still needed, and so you'll end up increasing taxes or increase water or sewer rates. So that will still affect the renters, most likely, or homeowners, both.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So, yep.
Frank?
I'm kind of interested in this concept of when we pay impact fees. I've had several conversations where, it was clear to me that at least with respect to affordable units, whether it's the project is 100% affordable or 20% or 10%, it seems that with respect to all affordable units, we ought to at least allow accommodation for paying those impact fees upon certificate of occupancy. It's a carrying cost that the developer has to take on that increases the cost because, for lack of a better description, our cost of our opportunity cost with funds that we receive is a whole lot less than the cost of the developer to provide those fees to us up front when he's not going to get that money back for months or maybe a couple of years. And so it just seems to me that in terms of affordability and how we ought to focus making affordable units preferred is by offering opportunity for any affordable unit, be it one or a dozen or an entire development. Those should be paid at, or I would be interested in allowing those to be paid at the time of a certificate of occupancy.
So in the language, and this is just to make it clear, so if it was, for example, I think you'd have to look at, the PUD, they have a required 10%. So of a development, say the one we just talked about, south of 93, or south of 40. Each building would be one building permit because it's one building. And so you could allow for all of them to be this C of O because they are providing some affordable housing. But by doing it 100%, if you had like all of Trailview, all of Depot Park Townhomes, all of Alpengo 2, all the ones that we know are providing 100%, they would get that benefit. I'm fine with however council wants to do it. If you say a development includes any, but the way we do it is with building permits. It's not just the development itself as a whole. So like even a subdivision, or for example, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, there was the one west of town. They had asked for, they were doing some affordable housing, I believe, and they had asked for impact fees to be at time of C of O, and because you didn't know which part they were doing first and when they would get to that phase that had the affordable housing, I think the council was not inclined to allow for that payment at C of O.
Okay, well, that sounds to me like, and you may have pointed out the reason it's practically impossible to do, but it just seems to me that if building one has got, of 6, has got 5 of 20 units in it, you say, okay, those units, 5 on building 1, you don't pay the impact fees on those 5 units, whatever that calculation is, until time of occupancy. And I don't know whether that makes your job or makes the staff's job impossible in terms of managing it, but it just occurred to me that that would be a way to equitably deal with, we get a little bit of benefit, they get a lot of benefit practically in terms of carrying costs on the back end by paying them as late as they can, and I kind of get that.
Yeah.
But so that's what I'm not suggesting an entire building that's only 10% affordable get that break. It's only the 10% of that building that gets that break.
I think that the challenges I see with that is that water and wastewater would be meter size, which in a building like that would be 1 meter. And so we couldn't waive the water, we wouldn't delay the water and wastewater, and we would have to separate out the units in that building permit. We calculate it all as one building permit and one fee, so it would be a lot more time consuming for staff to do that. Not impossible,
Right.
but I fear the more you have to deal with that, the higher the risk for errors.
Okay, thank you.
Frank, can I just add one thing really
Sure,
quickly
yeah.
too? When we're doing, especially apartment units, multifamily, we encourage, if they're doing more than one building, that these be interspersed throughout the building.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my point, is trying to give them, I want to encourage, for lack of a better description, an integration as opposed to a reservation.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm trying to figure out, is there a way for us to accommodate that and incent that by providing that kind of a benefit? That's my rhetorical question.
Ben?
Well, let me ask a related question is, why don't we just collect all impact fees at time of occupancy permit?
So, I mean, it's a possibility, but there's a couple challenges to that is the, being able to, everything will be installed, meter sizes have to be prepared. C of O, holding that up, is a lot harder than holding up the building permit process. We've found where if we wait to C of O for certain things, C of O will be issued and then we're out of luck. We have actually individuals identified on this lawsuit list that didn't pay impact fees because it wasn't paid at building permit time and somehow the permit got issued. And so we've seen these errors occur. C of O is a lot harder to hold up than at the building permit time. So also, why not incentivize the affordable housing over non-affordable housing projects? I think, if we were trying to do something for affordable housing, it would make sense to have those separated out as, Jerry had requested. But again, it's common to see it at building permit time.
I mean, I just did some quick math, and I mean, a typical single-family home might pay $20,000 in fees, and if you finance that at 8% over the course of the bill, I mean, it adds up. It's something.
That was my point.
I mean,
Maybe, again, my lawyer hat goes back on again. Everything can be fixed with something. It seems to me that, again, it's a practical issue here. If we were to take either with respect to let's just take it as a whole, we'll pay them at C of O. But here's the deal. If they're not paid at any point, those become a lien on that building, and we pursue foreclosure immediately. I mean, that just seems to me to be it's a harsh fix.
I don't know that we'd have the legal authority to lien it. The problem that I see is, I'd have to look at it, Frank. I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Right.
What I would tell you is that requiring people to pay them a building permit, if they don't pay them, they're not getting their permit, right?
Correct.
We have people that are living in houses without a C of O.
Right.
So, and I don't think it would happen for big developments. Multifamily's gonna go get their C of O.
Right.
Affordable housing is gonna go get their C of O. Houses themselves, it's not, it's required, but again, we have, what do you do when you're like, it falls through the cracks?
Right.
They're living in the house. Do we go evict them somehow? I just think practically speaking, I think Dana makes a really good point. Let's incentivize some affordable housing. I think it's definitely a carrot. And again, for big multifamily, I don't think it would be a big deal. They go get their C of O.
Right.
Certain other people don't, and then we're stuck with a person living in a house that hasn't paid impact fees, and how do we get them out?
I have my solution. It's complicated. It's harsh.
Rebecca?
This is something that staff could look at and bring back, even if we adopt this tonight, though, right? We could always amend this or not to come up with other solutions.
I guess at the second reading, you could on the ordinance
If you
amend
come up
it.
with any other ideas because I agree with Frank, and, I love the incentive part, the 100% affordable, but we all kind of had that sticker shock when we looked at this, and actually it was Giuseppe's opinion that really swayed me not to change them, because he was right. He said, we have to pay for capital improvement projects, and this is the only way we can really do that. We're never going to have a TIF fund again, because we don't have enough blighted property in town to ever have that. So we have to pay for what we need to build somehow. So, but I just was wondering if you guys could think about it, maybe how to open up the idea of affordability with projects that are not 100% affordable, if there's another way. But the other question I had is, we did talk about using impact fees for streets at one point, and I just brought it up because of Wisconsin, because it's so difficult to get Wisconsin rebuilt, and I thought maybe we could use impact fees for rebuilding Wisconsin, but you decided not going to happen. And
So you guys have given direction for the city to work with Tischler-Bice to do a transportation impact fee. we are waiting for this process to be done. This is very important because every day we go without adopting an ordinance, and under this new service area report and impact fee study, it's keeping the class that was just certified going. So once we do adopt this, that will end the class. It'll give us an end date for when that class ends. But we will proceed with that once we've finalized this. Tischler Bice has given us a dollar figure. It's not in the budget, but we'll bring that forward with the contract when that's ready. But, you know, and then I guess, Ben, I would ask, you know, $20,000, what's the average cost of the home? And what percentage is the impact fees of that home? Because if the home's a $800,000 home, 20,000 is only 2.5%. It's not as big as it sounds when you're looking at a single family home. And obviously they range. I understand it's a lot. You guys can delay the implementation over a 3-year period if you want and do, or a 4-year period to do 25%, 25%, 25%, or 50, whatever it might be. That is an opportunity. I don't think it finishes by the end of it, but you know, you'll still run into that we still have high impact fees at the end. But again, this is council's prerogative to have impact fees, and just knowing that the projects will be funded either way, we have to have the South Water Reservoir to support growth and current residents. There is a percentage split there. So we do have those requirements we'll have to do eventually.
Further questions, or can we go on to the public hearing, please? Giuseppe.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Ben. Ben, where did you pick the 20,000?
Oh, I was doing math in my head about, I'm not talking about the 20,000, I'm talking about when we collect impact fees at building permit, the owner has to finance the impact fees over the course of the project. And $20,000 is just a number off the top of my head about what a single house might cost.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions for Dana, for the record more than for my information. Dana, is it correct that with the current impact fees, if I build a dwelling of 600 square feet or less, or I build a home of 10,000 square feet, I am subjected to the same fee, which is $1,376?
For the non-utility impact fees, not excluding water and wastewater, yes, that is correct, because it's a standalone single-family home.
So if I'm building a subdivision with 10 houses of 600 or less square feet, for that part I'd be paying $10,000. I used to pay around $13,000. But if I built 10 single houses of 10,000 feet each, I would still pay $13,000 today for the non-utility, not wastewater component, because it's $1,300 per unit. Doesn't matter if it's 10,000 square feet or 600 square feet. Am I correct?
I believe you're on track, but math in my head, I'm an accountant, I need a calculator.
Okay,
I gotta write that down.
We'll write it in the minutes. Now, with the new study and the new proposal, which I would argue is not increasing the fees because the model is completely different. If I build a 600 square foot dwelling, I pay $1,400 and $14.37. If I build a 10,000 square foot home, I pay $5,306. Is that correct?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yes,
Okay.
that's the methodology
So
there.
it's page
It is correct.
115
Oh,
of
thank
the
you.
packet.
That's
for
what
all
I
of
need.
us. I have had
Yes, that's
letters asking me about incenting or disincenting affordable and workforce housing. At the same time, we know that a 10,000 square foot home, we assume, I don't have the data, will not be used for workforce housing, while a 600 square foot dwelling might be used for workforce housing. Since the impact is an impact that we all residents will have to pay, either in property taxes or in utility fees, it's an impact that will increase the cost to the community. The philosophy of this new method says, if you are coming in and develop a 10,000 square foot home, which by the way, the study says it's for 3.69 people occupancy, which I would argue could be more than that, so the impact should be more in my mind, will charge you $5,306. But if you're building only a 600 square foot home, we charge you only $1,437, which is an increase, if we want to talk about increase, which I disagree, of $61 from the original fee that they're paying today. Now, if I'm building a house that costs $200,000, say that again? Exactly. But say I do, and I was building it 5 years ago, at 3% mortgage, I would pay $6,000 a year, more or less, in interest. Today, for that same $200,000, I pay $12,000 a year interest. So in my mind, the impact to affordability needs to be looked at in the whole picture. I would argue more with the banks and financial institutions than with the community paying a little bit more or a little bit less tax on the smaller units. If we look at the same hotels and retail, the same discussion applies. Having said all of this, the paper today, Daily Interlake, on the front page, quotes numbers, and I've been asked about those numbers. And there is a quote on the front page that says, Whitefish changes on impact fees of about $7,400 for a single family unit, and will determine whether to increase that fee, Whitefish charges today, $7,400, and will determine whether to increase that fee to about $11,600. I couldn't find where Heidi, and I didn't have time to call her, Heidi, our former local reporter, now feature editor, found those numbers. I can only assume that she added up the largest home non-utility fees plus certain meter plus something else, but I couldn't find where a single house is charged $7,400 today and will be charged $11,800 in the future. So I wanted at least to put it out because it's on the paper and I received comments about this and address if it's something that it's accurate or it's interpreted.
So I would take that, and again, I come up with 11,697. I don't know exactly what the Daily Interlake reported, but if you were to take, on page 115 of the packet, you look at the average single-family unit is 2,000 to 2,499 square foot. The maximum supportable fee for the Tischler-Bice report is 3,753. Our standard meter size is 3/4 inch for a home of that size. And so if you were to take the maximum supportable fee for a 3/4 inch, that would be $7,944 for the water and wastewater utilities. So that would come up to the $11,697. And then if you just looked at the increase and decrease on those, and you took the from what we currently charge, the 2,377 plus, let's see here, plus the 1,847. I can't. This is where I really need to do stuff in my head. Oh. The total increase is $4,224 for the average.
Okay, thank you.
2,000
So
square foot
for
home.
the people who wrote, it seems, we cannot speak for the editor, but it seems that we're looking at 2,500 square foot home.
Between a 2,000 and 2,000.
Thank you
just under
so much.
2,500.
Now, I have one or two more questions. If I have my home and I add a bathroom, luxurious bathroom with 2 showers, a new jacuzzi tub with my 3/4 inch meter that I already had, what's my impact fee?
So if you add a bathroom and so it depends on how the meter sizing
I don't
is
change the
determined.
meter.
If you don't have to change a meter and the meter sizing is the same, regardless of fixtures added, you pay the same fee as you did before. You don't have to pay an additional fee.
So if I did that with the current fees, would I be subjected to a fee?
You could be, yes, yeah, with the.
So in that
impact
case, we're
fees.
decreasing the fee.
For those type, if there's not an expansion on the fixture count.
So
that moves the
let's make
meter
sure
size.
that we don't bundle it all together, because I repeat, we are taking to the ballot a 10% of the 3% resort tax to go towards affordable housing. And we are saying that we should be careful at charging not completely deeded affordable housing here, because we want to incent those developments. We don't charge them, the community will pay for it. So even themselves, like you said. So I've been always against any increase in tax that is dictated by.
Giuseppe, I just want to clarify, we haven't said that we want to not charge them, we're delaying when they pay the impact fee, not charge them. We delay when they have to pay the impact fee. So they
sorry,
still have to pay the impact fee, just not at time of building permit.
Okay, I misunderstood the proposal. Thank you. And the fully deeded affordable housing are zero impact fee.
So, no, they would pay the full impact fee, but it would just be, the collection would be delayed till the certificate of occupancy. Right now, it's at building permit for all impact fees.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Dana, for the clarification. And I'm done with my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Further questions for staff, or can we go to the public hearing? We did advertise for a public hearing on ordinance 23-23 as well as resolution 23-34, approving amendments to the rates and policies for impact fees assessed by the city. Any public comment this evening? I do have a sign-up list, but please don't hesitate if you didn't sign up. Name and address for the record when you approach the podium, please. Who'd like to start? Chuck.
Mayor Mulfeld and members of the council, my name is Chuck Stearns, 698 Woodside Lane here in Whitefish. I'm a member of the Impact Fee Advisory Committee, and the committee supported the changes as proposed to you tonight, and I support those changes. Certainly adding police facilities and fire facilities, and especially fire apparatus, I think is a very good step. It seemed like the city was always behind on providing fire apparatus at a reasonable level. The committee talked a lot about the sticker shock you've been talking about tonight. And I asked Colin of Tischler Bice the reason or some rationale for the maximum fee. And I did ask him, I said, of all your clients, how many adopt the maximum fee? I was thinking it might be 50% would adopt the maximum fee. He said it was over 90% of the cities that are their clients adopt the maximum fee. It was also mentioned during the committee discussion that, as Giuseppe pointed out, if the impact fees don't pay for these costs, then that will fall on locals, property owners, and renters to pay those costs. It's not like those costs go away, they just get transferred somewhere else. Originally, I made a motion to phase them in, to recommend phasing the fees in over a period of time. That died for any support actually in the committee, so we had to reevaluate that aspect. And it was the same reasons that primarily that if you delay it, locals and property owners and renters pay more than they would otherwise. On the issue of temporary or certificate of occupancy, if you go down that road, I would suggest you make the payment occur at temporary certificate of occupancy rather than the final CO. A lot of times people can get temporary CO for occupying and living in there, and then you're waiting for final CO for landscaping or other minor costs. I think you got your best collection method before you would issue a temporary CO as compared to a final CO, certificate of occupancy. It was discussed a little bit, but if you look, I think it's page 270 of your packet, It's page 65 of, I think, their PowerPoint presentation or something. The percentage of valuation that impact fees represent on your typical projects is quite small. If an average single-family development is going from 7,000 to 11,000, as shown on that page, that's still, as a part of the cost of the value of the project, an increase of 0.6%. So that really means the impact fee is probably about 1.8% of the whole valuation. Impact fees just really aren't a big factor. They get a lot of interest from people, but they're really not a big cost factor typically in the cost of a building or development. If you do the certificate of occupancy delay, basically the city is becoming a bank for the developer. And I can understand the rationale for doing it to provide an incentive for affordable housing, but I don't sense a lot of public support for subsidizing market rate housing. So I don't know that you would want to do it for all of the projects because you've got possible collection issues. And again, you're just acting as a bank for the developer. But those are the reasons for supporting these changes, and I think you heard that the committee was unanimous in support of these changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, and for your service on the committee. Paul, just so you're aware, we do have your letter. It's part of the public record at this point, so we've read it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome to comment. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually that helps cut down my talk here right now. But thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Paul Gilman. Behind me is Bill Berg. He and I are homeowners in Whitefish, and we're opposed to the 2023 Tistler update for the following reasons. First of all, as you're all aware, Whitefish is currently a defendant in a class action lawsuit certified by the federal judge in Missoula. The plaintiffs in this suit are Whitefish property owners who paid impact fees. The lawsuit accuses city officials of illegally overcharging impact fees since January 2019. And it appears now from our analysis, and we didn't go through a great in-depth analysis of the Tistler report, except for two certain areas, water and sewer. That's kind of where we've been focused with, even with the litigation. But it's some of the same practices, some of the same problems we identified in the the FCS report, we're seeing in the Tistler report. Now, I think, Rebecca, you had asked if the 4-to-1 number or 4 times more in fees was and that is in the current Tistler report. In fact, it's probably greater once we copied down the new Tistler report with the larger percentage of credits. That appeared to even broaden the problem that we identified. We created an engineering report. This is a detailed report that breaks down specifically the wastewater impact fees, broke it down, some of the formulas and the calculations done, and we found that there was a problem with the data. We don't question Tistler Beast's methodology or anything like that. It's some of the data that came from the city, from the Public Works Department, just didn't match what should have gone into that calculation. That went all the way through. We submitted this to the plaintiff's attorneys, who then sent it to their expert witness, who was actually, is Mr. Campbell, and I'll give you his credentials, which you probably all know. He's a professional engineer with expertise in public work systems, and he's an owner of an engineering company down in Missoula. He reviewed it. He came to the same conclusion we did. Actually, he refined it a little bit more. He found out, he kind of told us where the numbers should be. It's a significant error in the calculation, and it's going to make a big difference as far as what's being charged, and specifically wastewater. But we also found the very same problem in the water, that basically the wrong, I have to have the report in front of me to give you the exact terminology that was used by the expert. But basically, it was a data mismatch. The data did not match what was supposed to be in the formula and in the calculation. And we can see, going through it, we're kind of putting ourselves in some of the people who are doing these calculations, how there can be a mistake like this. But if you look at the results tell you right off the bat. When you have a $26 million wastewater treatment plant, and basically you're assigning a cost per gallon per day of $10 for that, but you got a simple little $177,000 what do you call it, plumbing project or piping project portion of it, you're charging $39. It's almost 10 times more or not 10 times, but 4 times more difference. That's where the number came from. And basically when you added these things together, they weren't scaled, and you came up with a very large overcharge. It went from, literally, the wastewater treatment plant was only generated like $700 of impact fees. Tissler Bees wrote to the city and said, hey, you're not going to be able to collect much in impact fees if you use just the wastewater treatment plant. And we looked at the calculations, and it fit with what's standard throughout the country as far as costs for processing wastewater. That was a correct number. But when it came to the plumbing side and the piping, that was way off. I mean, it was so far off. It should be in the pennies or the maybe under $1, but it was $39. So that's the magnitude of the problem that we found, and we think it needs to be investigated. And that's why, principally, why that the open letter was written to you all. Let's see, I think it covers most of it, but I would like to say one thing, another issue is I really applaud the city for getting rid of fixture units in calculated impact fees. It is a nightmare, it's hard to manage, it's hard to calculate, and then you've got homeowners out there that are now, are they criminals because they're adding a, what do you call it, a water fountain or something to their home, a sink to their home? That's not the way it should be. And there's no other city in the state of Montana that calculates impact fees using fixture units. So again, I applaud everyone for getting rid of that. But one step further, and this is also in my report, as far as calculating meter size, which now is the dominant way of calculating water and sewer impact fees, it's the water meter. Every city in the state of Montana uses the Uniform Public Plumbing Code to determine water meter size. We did in our SB 142 research, I created a report and I called the top 17 cities, the public works departments, and contacted them and asked them how they, first of all, calculate or how they determine meter sizes. And to the person, they all said it's UPC with the exception of one city. And that city, as it turns out, said, well, yeah, we use the American Water Works Association, but they're more focused on high industrial type project. This was Billings with some of their industrial stuff, not, residential. So everyone doing residential is using the Uniform Plumbing Code. And you can literally, in one page, and a high school kid can fill it out, they can fill out, going around their house and count the number of fixtures, and then that's on page 1. On page 2 of the UPC, there's just a little table. You look up what your meter size is, what's the maximum meter size. It's very simple, much simpler than the American Water Works Association, which requires a lot of analog charts and counts fixture units, totally different as well. Well, anyway, thank you for letting me speak tonight, and good night.
Thanks, Paul. Bill.
You have prepared, excuse me. Why does it always jump in your throat when you start? I have some prepared remarks, and I'd like to modify them a little bit on what I heard from Dana. For historical perspective, in September 2021, a little over 2 years ago, Paul and I delivered a 30-plus page written report on known improper and illegal activities going on in City Hall as it relates to single showers and impact fees. You probably don't know, but exactly 3 weeks prior, we met with the 2 chief financial officers of this city in the conference room down the hall. Dana was not truthful with us. I saw the videotape of the 21st of September. He was not truthful with me.
Point of order, Bill. I don't want you calling out any particular employee and discrediting them publicly,
All right,
please.
I don't want to
Because
speak
that's
into
just your
that issue.
opinion.
That's your opinion.
I would simply highlight what was said.
Continue.
I asked How many people other than Paul are there in this population of people who have been improperly charged? I'm told there were none. We don't think there are any.
You speak into the mic if you don't
Oh,
mind.
I'm sorry. A little closer?
That's great.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll put this over here closer to me. She said, we don't think there are any. I asked her that 3 times. On the 21st, when she said Mr. Gilman was right to you, you asked her, what's the butcher bill? And she said, she was said, it's on the videotape, so I'm just repeating, it's something you can look up, $60,000. We know the shower, the overcharge was $428. I had estimated 500 units at 400 came to 200. In February, it had grown to 196,700, 96.6. Clearly, there were more than one. We didn't have any official records. They were in this office, in this building, and they were not put forth, not even a sample of that. So that demonstrates to you, I hope, the degree of truthfulness or forgetfulness. You put a label on it, but it wasn't truthful. We came to you as friends at that time in September, and we do it again today. You're the responsible officials, and at that time we felt there was a growing illegality in City Hall. And it would likely embarrass the city government and its citizens. Our message was largely ignored. Go back and look at the tape. Review the tape. The result is a multi-million-dollar federal suit in federal court. The primary offense is not a municipal law. It's not a county ordinance. It's not a state ordinance, but it's the federal Constitution itself in the Fifth Amendment. That's the issue, unfair taking. The first major decision that was affirmed as a valid cause, if proven in trial. The second one was about, I think it was a week ago Friday, where the class was certified. The argument in the class, I attended the hearing, I listened to it. Every city claim was denied. Every claim by the petitioners was upheld. I don't know what the score is, 9-0, 8-0, I've forgotten how many there were. Today we are delivering a similar message on a more current topic, and that's the one before you. Our motivation is the same. The errors and illegalities are probably a magnitude higher than they were, or what we thought they were at that time. The evidence is equally compelling if you have an expert look at the testimony provided to the court. You're the elected officials. You took an oath. What I urge you to do is do the right thing. Study it personally, and if you don't have the technical skills to do it, which most of us don't, hire somebody that's independent of the people working on it today. That's your charge. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak to you.
Thanks, Bill. Further public testimony on this item? Michelle, anyone online?
For those of you who are online, if you'd like to speak towards this, please raise your hand. We're good.
Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearings for ordinances 23-23 and resolution 23-34 and turn it back to the council for discussion or preferably a motion one way or another. And we do require 2 separate motions for both the ordinance and resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve ordinance 23-23, an ordinance adopting amendments to the city's impact fee and an ordinance first reading, and I would move that we adopt resolution 23-32, a resolution approving the amendments to the rates and policies for impact fees assessed by the city of Whitefish.
And that'll be resolution 34.
Is it 34? I'm
Just
sorry.
for the record.
Yep.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Counselor Norton. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I made this motion. I may make an amendment or move to remove it from the consent agenda next meeting if I can come up with a decent way for us to deal with the even partial affordable housing developments and be able to delay or somehow manage their impact fees to a later time.
Further comments?
Can I just make sure that you guys are considering the city hall part with that motion, and that you are saying we will be moving forward in 10 years? So I just want to make sure that is clearly stated.
Ange?
I just want to make some clarifications for the public's benefit about what was just said about the class action lawsuit. Class certification is not an adjudication on the merits. And I feel like that was a bit misrepresented up here. This class has been certified. There has been no decision made on the merits of that lawsuit. The report that was submitted to the city referenced in Mr. Gilman and Mr. Berg's letter to council was actually the rebuttal report from the plaintiff's paid expert on liability. It was not submitted to the city and really has nothing to do, why it's even an expert report in the lawsuit is beyond me, because what the lawsuit has to do with is FCS's impact fees. It does not have to do with Tischler-Weiss's impact fees. So I just wanted to make that very clear. And again, just because the class has been certified does not mean the court has made a decision, does not mean, you know, it is very, it's just doesn't have anything to do with the merits of their claim. So I just want that, I don't think if you're a lawyer sometimes you don't realize that, but I just did want to really clear the record on that.
I appreciate that, Angela.
You bet.
Steve?
I just for peace of mind, I guess, I don't understand clearly Mr. Gilman's comments about the methodology in calculating the impact fees regarding the water and wastewater.
Water and wastewater. So it has to do, you know, with the, basically the percentage eligible to growth. One of those was updated. And it's important to note that their expert that they're referencing has worked on one impact fee study for transportation only, not water and sewer. And so to call him an expert, when we just looked at what Tischler-Weiss's resume is, I think is misleading as well. Yes, he might be a great engineer and he might do good work. I assume he does. But when it comes to impact fee studies, I think it's really hard to call him an expert compared to who we're working with. Tischler-Weiss has reviewed the letter from Mr. Gilman and Berg and has said they would make no changes to their report. So I think, you know, that's the most important part here. Again, this expert witness report that's part of the litigation and really not even part of what's under question. We did also send that to Tischler-Weiss, and they're, again, not concerned at this point. So.
Okay, thank you. So it's our opinion, or it's the staff opinion, that these calculations are done properly, and the water and wastewater impact fees are calculated based on the right data. That seems to be the issue, is that they feel like they didn't get
the reason that we don't calculate impact fees ourselves as a city is we're not experts in it.
Right.
That's why we hire experts in it. As Dana said, Tischler-Weiss said they would stand by their report. I don't think any of us as staff can sit there and say, oh yeah, the math is right, or you know, the calculation's right. That's why we have experts. That's why we hire consultants. That's why we don't do this stuff ourselves, because we would likely all make a mess of it.
I just want to make sure that the data that they got was consistent, because that seemed to be their question.
So the data is what is requested. All the data that went into this was discussed with Tischler-Weiss. We understood what they requested of us, and we discussed it. One of the things they're calling into question for wastewater, for example, if you look on page 169 of the packet, it's the piping, the future capacity enhancements needed for the wastewater facility. Our service area is the entire city. The wastewater is the entire facility, the plant, the pipes, all of it. And so they're calling to question the future capacity enhancements. As you know, we upsize when we replace cast iron water mains, we upsize. When we replace our sewer lines, we upsize because we know there's development requiring additional demand. We'll see it, with a potential development south of town. They'll have to increase the capacity south of Highway 40. But that's something the developer will do, and so it's not included as part of an impact fee here because they're gonna do it as part of their project specific. So I'm comfortable with the expertise of Tischler Bice and what we've provided them. Our attorneys, defense counsel has reviewed Tischler Bice's report. We as staff have reviewed it, and I feel confident that this is appropriate, again, given the experts that we have hired.
Okay, thank you both for weathering the storm there as well, and I just wanted to get your opinion just want to make sure for my own peace of mind, that we've done our due diligence on this. So, and not that I really questioned it, but wanted to make sure that the public knows that.
Rebecca.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward to hear that we might be passing something that could be deeply flawed, but I just want the public to know that we have done our own analysis in the past, but we've hired an engineering firm twice now, I think, or more, to set the fees. Then we also hired another outside consulting firm to make sure that everything with our new methodology is working. And so we do this frequently with big projects. We have to find people that are experts in their field to guide us to be fair to everybody. That being said, I appreciate it when the citizens bring errors to us. Like, we knew early in 2021 that we had a data entry error because someone got trained and interpreted it incorrectly, and so we were thankful that we could fix that. So that's what this lawsuit started out from, is just a simple human error with data entry. So I feel comfortable passing this through because I feel like it's been stressful for staff to go through litigation, but we also need to get it right for the public, and so I agree the public should know that we are innocent until proven guilty, but we are required to engage in litigation when it comes to us also. So that's all. Thank you.
Further comments, Ben?
It just feels like we've hired expert after expert to look at this stuff, and they're all saying it's done correctly, and at some point it is. So I'm comfortable moving ahead with it. As for the numbers themselves, I mean, I did share some sticker shock with everybody, I think, on the increases, but I do think it's important to understand that these are not tax increases. The spending of the city is staying the same. It's a question of who pays for it. And I know we live in a very high growth town, and there's a lot of development happening. There's a lot of housing units being created, and it's a very simple question. Every time a toilet is plumbed, there has to be capacity at the plant to clean the water. And so either the existing residents, you and I pay for it, or we ask the growth to pay for the growth. And I think as a matter of fundamental fairness, I do think growth needs to pay for the growth. And so even though I'm a builder and I hate paying fees and nobody likes it, I think it's a matter of fairness to the citizens that we honor that, and I plan to pass this here tonight. Thanks.
Further comments? Andy?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. I think that if we realize the amount of money we've appropriated in the last 4 years sitting up here, which is close to $37 million for wastewater and water. And we've also raised sewer and water rates, which affects affordability of housing probably as much as anything in this community for a lot of people on fixed incomes. And if we don't have impact fees to offset those costs that are, as you said, driven by new development almost 100%, then we pass that along in rate increases to people in their homes. And that's $37 million we'd have to generate in rate fee increases. That's a lot of money for people. And I think that's what kind of gets lost in the argument a lot of times. And I think, Giuseppe, I'm kind of coming back to something and it kind of caught me a little off guard at first when looking at the non-wastewater and water portions of it, is if you look at a 6,000 square foot home, it pays roughly about 0.2% in all of the other fees, as opposed to a smaller home and a 1,500 square foot home to 2,000 square foot home, they're going to pay almost 5%, or 0.5%, excuse me, 0.48 actually. And at first it kind of caught me a little off guard, and I was looking at it, well, that doesn't make sense to me. But then when you look at it and they're based on occupancy, and essentially what happens if you translate those numbers all the way through, it works out pretty well, because they're looking at 1.5 people in that smaller house, and they're really only looking at about 3 people in the bigger house. You know, so that's a pretty flat curve. It increases and then flattens out at about 4,000 square feet, and then it just goes like this. So for impacts on parks and all those kind of things, finally I was able to wrap my head around it and make some sense out of that. But at first I looked at it, I was like, well, that's stupid. Why are those guys paying that much less? So anyway, that's my only comments.
Thanks, Andy. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. The motion does carry unanimously. We're going to go ahead and recess for just a few minutes.
Fire Department Strategic Plan.
Call the meeting back to order, and we'll move on to item 7C, which will be Resolution 23-35, adopting the Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Plan. Cole.
So in March 2021, we contracted with AP Triton to prepare a long-range master plan for the Whitefish Fire Department. That long-range master plan was adopted by City Council in December of 2021. That's a 10-year strategic plan, or master plan, excuse me. The council adopted a resolution establishing the Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Planning Committee. That committee was tasked with setting tangible goals and objective timelines for funding and assigned responsibilities, and recommended for the long-range fire department master plan. In the committee, we took the 45 recommendations from the AP Triton master plan and created a strategic plan and broke those down into 9 plans. The Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Planning Committee presented the recommended Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Plan to the City Council at a work session in July of this year. And directed by Council, we have drafted a resolution to consider for adoption for the Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Plan and recommendations by the committee. The Whitefish Fire Department Strategic Plan is a planning tool and a guide in the process to implement recommendations in the long-range Whitefish Fire Department Master Plan. Some recommendations will have fees such as increasing staffing, procuring rate studies. However, those will be appropriated during the annual budget process, and there's nothing in this strategic plan to hold us specifically to any of those costs.
Oh, thanks, Chief. Didn't know you were done. Any questions for Cole? Frank?
Cole, as I recall, at one point discussing the strategic plan, you had, certainly right after you became chief, you had some concerns about wanting to review it before we move forward with it. Are you comfortable with what we've got in front of us now?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the strategic plan as it's written. The nice part about the position I was in before is I was part of the planning committee, so I was along with the process as we went. And we have all reviewed the plan, and we are comfortable with it as it's written.
Great, thank you.
Further questions for Cole? Ben?
Cole, I noticed that in Plan 9, the projects requiring further study, which would be the ones that are kind of being punted for later, you've got some things in there related to wildland fire response and hazmat response. I wonder if you could just talk generally about how well prepared you feel for hazmat. I assume that's like train derailments and things like that. And if you feel that we are adequately addressed, and does this plan continue to adequately address those concerns?
Yeah, and I would have to look specifically what those, what areas of those we were saying recommended needed further study. But generally, I think we are very well prepared. We're doing ongoing training when it comes to, say, for your example, the train derailment hazardous materials response. Just next month, there's a large tabletop planning exercise that is going on in the county that's involving all stakeholders, fire department, police department, public health, BNSF, and we're going over some potential train derailment situations that may occur. And the scenario that we're doing is based off of the 2nd Street crossing in Whitefish. So we are doing ongoing training and planning for that. There's also a lot of other state organizations that are at a much higher level of training for specifically hazmat response that we do partner with. So that in itself, I think, is an ongoing process, and we will continue to train on those things. By putting these as needing further prior study to implementation is not stopping us from the planning and the training process. And the same would go for the wildland fire response stuff as well.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be Resolution 23-35. Is there any public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online? Go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council. Steve?
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 23-35, resolution adopting the Whitefish Fire Department strategic plan.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Chief Hadley. We'll move on to item 7D, which will be Resolution 23-36, authorizing the submission of an application for a Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing grant to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this is on page 309 of the packet. Welcome.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is a recommendation to support a grant application to the Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing grant to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD. As you're probably well aware, the 2022 Whitefish Community Housing Roadmap directs the city to pursue federal and state grants for the purpose of supporting our affordable housing objectives. So this is going to be one of the first ones toward that goal. Just a few months back, HUD issued a notice of funding opportunity which appropriated about $85 million for a competitive grant application for the purpose of identification and removal of barriers to affordable housing production and preservation. So this grant application process is ongoing, due toward the end of October. And so we are an eligible applicant as a local government. And the grant awards are between $1 and $10 million, so it's a pretty big chunk of change here. That certainly could do quite a bit for our housing needs. There's a pretty wide, long list. I've included just a few of those kind of activities that are proposed by HUD, but there's a pretty wide range of activities that they would accept under this housing application. But the specific activities we are proposing is contained within the grant application, which you are all able to read through all 30 pages of. So there's three kind of specific areas that we're looking at. The first one is the biggest one is helping with our growth policy build-out analysis. These are activities which we were going to engage the majority of regardless. That's that consists of looking at and identifying our environmental constraints to building and construction, whether that's slope, groundwater, some things like that. Analysis of all of our vacant land, looking at what the highest and best use is, kind of a full scenario build-out analysis, a water system capacity analysis, sewer system capacity, stormwater, traffic, and the like. That's all going into the growth policy and assisting with the analysis that's going to be put together citywide for that. The second piece there is in a zoning for affordability study, and coupled with that is kind of a no net loss preservation policy. That's something that's looking at how our zoning code can change to increase the amount of affordable housing built likely and hopefully by private developers to kind of supplement our very low affordable housing plans. Yeah. And lastly is a community housing development plan. That is kind of serving as a master plan for future affordable housing development, serving kind of our very low and low income needs. So essentially we're assuming approximately $1 million. This is going to be all devoted to hiring one or more consultants to do this work for us, managed obviously by staff, with the same goals as recognized in the housing roadmap. That is the maintaining that ownership and renter mix, kind of income targeting, making sure we have housing available for all levels of income within the city, the primary home and secondary home relationship, and the jobs and housing relationship. And those actions are coming straight out of the 2022 housing roadmap under the Activate Public and Private Development Priority Action 1, create the Community Housing Development Plan, which are there Priority Action 3, creating the pipeline of land development opportunities and next year projects. And then under strategy to implement policies to support community housing of Priority Action 1, updating growth policy, Priority Action 5, zoning for affordability and flexible forms, and Priority Action 6, the no net loss and preservation policy regulations. So I will note this was intended as a public hearing, as HUD is asking us to submit along with this application a summary of all public comment. That's noting to them that we did kind of outreach.
Makes your job a little easier.
We did at least outreach to the community, and this is a community plan, not just something created behind closed doors. So obviously nobody here tonight, but I did want to mention and make clear that comments can continue to be submitted. That will be to my email, which is available both in the packet, on the website. There's a specific note there with my email and the full draft that you guys have access to as well. And in the Whitefish pilot, this will be advertised both for this meeting and upcoming next week. We are looking for as many public comments as possible. All will just get summarized and submitted to HUD along with this application to just give them an idea that we did work with the community and that this is a very important topic for the community as a whole. Should we happen to get this award grant, we can expect that to be about January or February of 2024, so we'll be sure to update you when that time comes. And lastly, probably the best part here is there's no funding match required at all, so there's potential for a lot of free money, so no financial obligation to the city at this time. With that, staff respectfully recommends the council adopt this resolution authorizing the submission of an application to a Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing grant to the HUD, and I can take any questions.
Thanks, Luke. Any questions for Luke? We'll start with Steve and then Rebecca.
So just to be clear, the money would not go towards housing, it would go towards planning.
Correct.
So
yeah,
it would be
we're
part
kind
of
of
our
building the
growth
tools
policy.
in our toolbox.
Okay.
The grant itself does allow for the creation of housing. It wasn't necessarily that specific. They were more targeting the kind of policy and long-range goals of breaking down those roadblocks and barriers to affordable housing production. And we felt we weren't necessarily ready to go forward with building as we don't necessarily have good sites or anything available to us yet.
Yeah.
So we're kind of working on the toolbox there to really get to that point should resort tax and some other things become available down the road.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
Rebecca.
Yeah, so normally I think for parks we've had to approve grant submissions, but we normally don't. But I just wanted to say, if anybody in the community is interested in what we've done and where we're at, I think your grant application is wonderful to read. Very, very well done.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I echo Rebecca's sentiments. Nice job on the application, Luke. Further comments or questions? We did advertise for a public hearing on resolution 23-36. Is there any public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online? Besides us?
No.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Ben?
I would move to approve resolution 23-34.
Second. 36.
36?
For the record, yep.
Did it wrong. Thank you.
Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Further discussion?
Thank you, staff, and thank you, Luke, for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, but these kind of things are important, and this is a very hot topic these days, so my fingers are crossed.
Great to see us chasing some
I'll
money.
reach out to some people and get you some public comment.
Yeah, it would probably help the grant submittal.
Yeah, we
I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Get the Housing 4 group that was here earlier.
Get Shelter Whitefish and others to, yeah.
Flathead families.
Yep, absolutely. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Thanks again, Luke. You have Dana's report and close with the packet. Any questions for our city manager? Dana, anything additional to report on?
Not on my manager's report, no, not this
Okay.
evening.
We'll move on to item 8C, ordinance 23-24, adding a new chapter 19 to title 2 of Whitefish City Code to establish the Whitefish Community Housing Committee as a standing committee, and this will be on a first reading.
Okay.
Dana.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. In the packet, you have a draft ordinance for your consideration to create the Whitefish Community Housing Committee as a standing committee. Currently, the committee is set to expire at the end of the calendar year, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us. One of the discussions last year when we moved from the Strategic Housing Plan Committee to the Whitefish Community Housing Plan Committee was that, whether we were to do it by resolution or make it a standing committee. Well, one of the topics was let's change the committee makeup, which was called for in the roadmap. We had done that. and let's see how that makeup works before we make it a standing committee. So it's been, close to a year that we've been operating, where we have 9 members of the Whitefish Community Housing Committee. It's made up of a representative from the city council or mayor, Housing Authority, Housing Whitefish, the Chamber of
John,
Commerce.
sorry, Dana,
Yes.
is there something going on outside?
People are just talking. Glacier Nordic just got out of
Oh,
meeting.
okay, sorry.
Gotcha.
I
No, we're
didn't know
fine.
if there was somebody snuck in.
Yeah, nope, good call. The Chamber of Commerce, the CVB, then we have 1 member of the public with experience, professional or personal in real estate, 1 member with professional or personal expertise in fundraising or financing, and 2 members of the public with professional or personal expertise in housing policy, property management, housing programs, end users, kind of a catch-all. The Whitefish Community Housing Committee did recommend that we move forward with making a standing committee at their September 25th meeting. Let's see here. There was 1 comment made by a member that wanted to see a position specifically for end users of community housing and or housing advocacy, for example, Shelter Whitefish. But the committee as a whole said, leave that, it's really up to council, and we'll proceed with the current 9-member makeup. Staff is supportive of this, of the positions that are listed, though we have observed some rare instances where we've actually had all 9 members present. So we've questioned, is 9 the appropriate number, or would a smaller committee be more productive? And so, the council could consider reducing the size to 7 members, but I also believe that, that's up to you guys. At this point, we're just proposing it as currently established, just turning the Community Housing Committee into a standing committee. So staff, along with the Community Housing Committee, respectfully recommends you adopt this ordinance.
Thanks, Dana. Any questions for Dana? Giuseppe? And then Frank?
Yes, am I correct that Ben and Mayor, you both are on that?
Just Ben.
Ben, I would ask you, because I think it's an important committee, the workings, is it better to be 9 or 7? I guess 9 creates a more of a challenge for the quorum, but I'll go with whatever you recommend.
My thinking is to leave it as it is. I think there's a good group in there, and I think there is a diversity of expertise, but I do think, generally speaking, everybody there is contributing, and I think, and my preference would be to adopt it as it is.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I was wondering if we reduced it. One of the things I get nervous about sometimes is conflicts of interest. So I was wondering if it would be possible to leave off real estate and banking, because I think if they then progress to create a program where they're getting money from something that we generate, that could be perceived as a conflict, and I would like a public member, like just a regular citizen on there. I think it's really important that we hear from people that are just parts of our community, not always just people that are working within the industry itself. But so this is my recommendation. Whitefish Housing Authority, Housing Whitefish, Chamber, CVB, 2 people that are involved in housing programs that are specifically for subsidized housing, because we are at that point where we don't really have market rate solutions available to us anymore. And then the other one would be a public member. And this is just from me being on the Strategic Housing Committee for a long time, is I feel like we need to be serious about where we're at with our housing situation, where we are unlikely to get developers coming back in with 100% affordable housing projects. And we have to look at how we're going to fund and subsidize housing for people to live here. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Ben's looking really worried at me, like, what?
Rebecca, I mean, I appreciate your thoughts on the conflicts issue, but I think that the point of having this group together is to bring together the types of expertises that we will need in forming any form or being able to move forward in planning, because we have to understand the needs of the real estate community as well as the banking and financial. So having that expertise on that committee doesn't necessarily, and I think we've done a pretty good job over the years of selecting people who recognize when there are conflicts, and I think we have. And I think that the answer to the question is we select people that recognize that that's a possibility, but they're interested in the process and in helping us understand and create a program that will actually work as opposed to one that's, I'll say, pie in the sky. I mean, I think we need that expertise on that committee in some form or fashion. That's my view. You do anything you want?
Yes, and then Giuseppe.
Just that once those programs are established, then we can approach people that would make money from those programs. So what I've seen up here is that sometimes we've had people involved that when we've tried to pass legislation, they had a conflict that would have affected their bottom line, and they resisted legislation that we were trying to propose. And so I think we're at a point where we always try to be open and encompassing for everyone, but I also think we need to take it very seriously that we're doing subsidized housing from now on, and we can always access other professions once things are determined. Anyways, I don't like conflicts of interest. I don't think people do disclose when they have a conflict. I just feel like it just gets kind of put under the table a lot.
I would entertain a motion or a question, Giuseppe? Please.
Actually, a question. I'm concerned about discussing perceived conflict of interest. I mean, conflict of interest is defined, in public office is defined, and it's either there or it is hearsay. So unless there is evidence and proof, Rebecca, I would invite all of us to be cautious about saying that we feel that someone has done something under conflict of interest. And sometimes it's not the person, it's the motion. So there are situations where in public office, a certain vote might be under conflict of interest, which is defined as financial interest. It's clearly financial interest, where people recuse themselves. If they don't recuse, it's like rolling through a stop sign. It's up to them. They can break the law. But I'm no one to define the committee lineup based on hearsay. That's why I position myself this way, and I cannot take into consideration hearsay. But if we have evidence, that should be brought up and be followed up on.
Ben?
May I make a motion?
Sure.
Move to approve ordinance 23-24.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Cornell. Further discussion?
If I could, I understand the concerns, Rebecca, I do. My experience in this topic has been that housing policy tends to be a very technical discussion sometimes, and I think that the citizens as a whole are better off by having people participating that have expertise in the subject matter than they would by the very small risk of conflict of interest, which I think we have enough policies hopefully to cover. So I think the composition that's there, I do think it does represent, there are a lot of subject matter experts in there. I do think that's important, that we're crafting policy that works and that'll be good for the citizens, and I think that we need that in there to make it happen. So my preference would be to keep the committee as it is.
All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us to mayor and council comments. Who would like to begin this evening? Giuseppe.
It's good to be back. It was good to be in Italy for 2 weeks. While there, they're doing some elections there. We always have elections in Italy because the government cannot last the proof of time. And we don't use signs because we don't have soil and grass. We're all concrete, but we use boards. And I noticed with my friends that many of those campaign boards were vandalized by spray painting artists with very graphic and derogative slogans. And I was very proud. I told them this wouldn't happen in Whitefish. We're doing a campaign right now, and this won't happen. I came home this morning at 2 a.m., and I realized that 3 of the signs that were displayed in my property and in my neighbor's property had been taken out. And I don't care who those signs are for, but I do care that in a community where we call it ourselves loving and all-inclusive, and we respect the First Amendment right of freedom of expression, I was very sad and disappointed to see that even in campaign, where hits below the belt sometimes are accepted, people trespass property and take signs away. So I would invite the public to be a little bit more respectful.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Couldn't agree more. Steve?
Sorry, I don't want to make this meeting much longer than it has to be, but something has come to my attention recently. There's still 2 of those big 300-gallon trash cans on Geddes, right when you turn off of Highway 93, take a left, or maybe it's Good Avenue. It's Good Avenue there. Yeah. There's still two big 300-gallon trash cans there, and I'm just wondering why.
We will have to take a look and see what addresses those are. The 300-gallon containers should have been swapped out. We know that Republic, I would say, we're having a challenging time actually getting confirmation of when they'll complete the full rollout, and we know there are missing properties. We are going through an audit of their records compared to ours, so we have staff working on that as well. But we can write down, we'll have them take a look at that area.
Yeah, just drive down Good Avenue. Just take a left off of
Okay.
93 right there. There's 2, one on the right, one on the left.
Okay.
And it's a very high bear area there.
Yep.
That's all.
As long as it's not I don't think there's commercial there. That should be residential, so it should be.
Well, there's the guy who.
There's the mechanic shop.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's, but it's also, I think it's like home-based commercial because it's his house too. I don't know.
Okay.
The one on the one on the west side of the street is all residential, for sure. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Steve. Frank?
Nothing this evening.
Thank you, Frank. Ben?
Last meeting, I made a comment that as a consequence of the legislative bill that allows residential and commercial zones, that the transitional zoning district is no longer transitional. I think that's true. But additionally, the interpretation that came out today that the conditional uses are no longer conditional also now impacts all of the other commercial zoning districts that we have, including B2 and otherwise. And so I'm just going to point out the fact that a lot of the projects we think are conditional are no longer conditional, potentially. And we have, what's that? That's correct. Yep. But it seems incongruous and something that I think we're going to need to think about one of these days.
Thanks, Ben.
Could I just make one
Yeah,
point
please.
of that? And I think it's really important because what we're seeing here is the impacts of what the legislature can do. And while many people don't like Senate Bill 382 that's changed the way we do our growth policy, we will actually, as a community and council, get to decide if the requirements of Senate Bill 245 is something we want or not. So there is no doubt a 3-year, until we get that growth policy done, we will have a time period where we have to implement 245. But in the end, that is the benefit of 382, in that we get to decide all these housing policies, including ADUs and some of those requirements. We can decide as a community what best serves us. You have to pick 5 housing strategies. Senate Bill 245 with the, if you have multifamily on top, or if it's mixed use and you at least have more than 50% housing, yeah, we have no longer conditional uses for now. But in the future, it's something we can consider through that growth policy amendment, or growth policy update.
Dana, do we now charge fines for overfilling beer containers and not latching them, or is that an effective bill now? I mean, law, ordinance
I think
now?
it went into effect. I can't recall when it went into effect, but they are required by code to do so. I believe it's effective now.
Yeah, I just ran into some people and they told me they were out on a walk and they thought 20% of the containers were unlatched with overflowing garbage. So would you mind reviewing what happens if people are found to have an unlatched bear-resistant container and overflowing trash? That they'll get a ticket?
It would be a municipal infraction at this point. We did write some language in there, Rebecca, that going forward in the future would perhaps allow Republic to charge extra, to tack on that extra, but we haven't really worked that out yet. Truthfully, we've had so many other issues with Republic in the past 2 years. 2 years that we're not really to that, but they would get a municipal infraction.
And the police would give that to them?
Yes, the police are the ones monitoring right now the garbage containers, whether they're latched or unlatched.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure people knew that. And then I wanted to thank the police and firefighters for a wonderful open house. Went yesterday, and I forgot how much little kids love firemen and policemen and women too, and ambulances, and you know, the alert helicopter was there, and the kids were just like in Gaga land. I forgot they need their heroes, you know, so it was just darling. And the SWAT team was there, search and rescue, and really nicely done, you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Andy? I don't think I have anything either. I was going to ask Maria what the status of the plaques are for the Roy Duff Memorial.
If I recall, they were in the process of being ordered, but I
The
can't.
last discussion we had was like a year and a half ago, and they were supposed to be online with the new wayfinding signs that were coming.
Yeah, I know that we have it budgeted, whether it's part of the Armory project or it's a separate one. I can get you an update from Maria though, but I do know we are proceeding with those.
I'd really like to see that get wrapped up.
Yep.
I mean, it's been a long time in the making, and it
I know
doesn't
the park
look
board had to
great.
figure out what signs they were supposed to be and what was supposed to be included. And so I know that there was a lot of work done on those to figure out what needed to be done. But I believe either we're ordered or they're ready to be ordered. So I'll confirm and have Maria send an update.
Okay. It's great to see the skate park expansion at the Dave Olseth Memorial Skate Park. Dave was a friend of mine and the best chalk artist ever. Remember, he used to have the big artwork behind the bar at the Dire Wolf every month. They'd swap it out. And anyway, a great memorial to Dave and his family. And it's great to see all the kids out there using that facility. So job well done to that team that organized that expansion project. Anything further from staff, Dana?
The only thing I remembered was the groundbreaking for the Depot Park Townhomes is on Thursday at 2 o'clock at the site. I believe I have Rebecca confirmed to attend on behalf of the city, and Steve may or may not be able to attend, but okay, sounds good. But it does not sound like we'll have a quorum present. But if you do plan on attending, please let me know. But I will be in attendance as well. So.
If by chance I get back to town in time, I'll let you know.
Okay,
So,
great. Thank you.
anything further from council? We are adjourned. Thank you.